Welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Allie.
We've got a fun one today, Champions League and preview of international break. My favorite, Allie's least favorite. We meet in the middle. It's going to be amazing. But first of all, should I tell the people briefly what we were chatting about before we hit record? I know everybody's always like, oh, just get to the football of it. But this is funny. This has to be discussed.
Yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, that both the USA and the UK had a national holiday. And it turns out me and Sarah did exactly the same thing. What do you think that would be? Going out, getting in a game of football, going for a long walk, going and enjoying. Like, no, we both have been binging this, let's be honest, trashy lesbian dating show that is on the BBC. Called I Kissed a Girl.
Yep. If you're watching it, hit us with some some tweets or DMs or something. We are so into it. I literally downloaded a VPN just so I could watch it. I was sick in bed and was like, I need this in my life. And you know what? It was worth it. And we've been laughing because the whole season I was like, I have to download the VPN because I would rather watch BBC coverage of some of these WSL games. Never downloaded it the whole WSL season. WSL season's over. Trashy reality show hits. And I'm like, immediately download the VPN.
Yep. Can I also say, can non-UK and non-Australian listeners hit me up if you knew who Dani Minogue was before watching this show, and if you knew who her sister Kylie was, because Sarah did not, and I called her uneducated.
But we learned from last episode that I might be uneducated in this space.
Just a little.
All right. Let's get into it. Let's get to the football of it.
So this past Saturday was the Champions League final. It was Barcelona looking to defend their title versus Lyon, who was looking to add a 9th title to their history. And I will have to say, while I don't think it was a game of the ages, I do think it was a great showcase of some brilliant football of two teams matching together.
I agree. It was a final. Lyon was grinding it out. Final score was Barcelona 2, Lyon nothing. And it needs to be said, official attendance 50,827 is a new record for the Women's Champions League final, which is absolutely amazing.
Which leads me to the question very quickly before we talk about the game, which is why are we giving the final to smaller and smaller stadiums? Because it's just been announced that the final in 2 years' time is going to a stadium that has the max capacity of 33,000.
That's really frustrating.
Why are we doing this, people? Clearly there is an appetite for it. We've seen it time and time again in the WSL. We're seeing it time and time again in the NWSL. We're seeing it in Europe, and we're seeing it.
I was going to say, we've talked about this with the Euros too, with the stadiums in the Euros that are being selected.
Yeah, so the stadium that the final for the 2026 Champions League final will be only at 33,000, which
disappointing.
It's disappointing because how can we grow if you're going to keep putting us in tiny stadiums?
Yeah, I mean, it's just that same feedback loop where, you can't say that the women's game didn't bring in as much money as the men's game if you're not even giving them the opportunity to. But to focus on the positive, a brand new attendance record, not surprising whatsoever. And as we thought, filled to the brim with Barcelona fans. I mean, it seemed like the atmosphere in that stadium was impeccable. I have to say, I said on the last episode that I expected it to be bumping with Barcelona fans. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, it is in Spain, but it is pretty equidistant to Lyon and Barcelona. The difference is that Barcelona fans have really become known for how they travel for their team. Wherever their team goes, they have shown up, and this was no different. And I really do think that was a big contributing factor. I think Barcelona would have won anyways, but like I said in the last episode, I thought they were going to win, and that was going to be kind of like the X factor, and I think that's what happened.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as the game progressed, you could just see that they did get that 12th man with the Barcelona fans behind them. The first, and we'll get into the game chat properly, but the first half was pretty damn even between the two teams, and they needed that something else to push them over the edge for the second half, and I do think their fans probably gave them that oomph.
Before we get into the game chat, it needs to be noted, with this win, Barcelona finally have toppled Lyon for the first time in a Champions League final. Barcelona beat Lyon. They had lost 2 times out of the 2 times they played in a final. And I think this is big for the dynasty of Barcelona. But beyond that, this is Barcelona's third Champions League trophy and their first quadruple, which means they won the Spanish Super Cup, the Copa de la Reina, La Liga Femenine, and then the Champions League. That is a feat. I mean, we talk about how in Spain it's a little bit different because there's a little less competition for Barcelona, but it's still a huge feat. And the fact that this is their first one kind of demonstrates just how hard it really is.
As we've said it countless times, tournament football is a completely different way of football, because we've seen Real beat them in, I believe, the Copa de la Reina and also the Super Cup before. We've seen, other teams, Levante getting up there and things like that. In tournament football is different football. And we've seen them lose the Champions League against Lyon. Like, we've seen it happen. So I'm not that unsurprised that it's their first quadruple, but I do think this is such a special set of players that they have garnered specifically for this season that has led them to this moment in time. We specifically see Kira Walsh settling down after a season there. We've seen, Batil came from Man United over there and is playing a huge role. We've talked about Graham Hansen countless times, both internationally and nationally, and we'll get onto her in the game chat because I thought she was game changing for Barcelona. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you say that and I just can't help but say it's jumping ahead, but it needs to be talked about first. It felt written in the stars for Barcelona when Putellas scored that second goal that really sealed the deal. We just have to talk about it because that's the moment where I just looked at the TV and I was like, it was one of those moments where I was filled to the brim with emotions, and you just can't help but be so happy for that player in that team. This is a player who, I mean, she is the queen of Barcelona, and she was on top of her game, on top of the world when she tore her ACL. And it's been basically 2 years, and she hasn't been able to find that same form since before that. And you can only imagine just how frustrating that is, being kept on the bench behind Bonmati. Obviously, Bonmati is incredible, but, the injury gave rise to Bonmati. And for her to have that moment, it felt like there couldn't have been a more perfect way to put a cap on that game. And I am so happy for her.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But it's crazy that, again, she was on the bench. This was what we're talking about, Barcelona's bench. The fact that, Putellas is on the bench for Barcelona. Their squad is, we talk about Chelsea's squad depth, but Barcelona's is something else.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I do genuinely think that could have been the difference maker. I think the better team won. Absolutely, hands down, the better team won. Barcelona played better. Yes, it was an even scoreline in the first half, but when you look at the possession, when you look at the opportunities, obviously Barcelona was always going to have possession more, but there was something about the fact that Lyon couldn't even really create dangerous opportunities on a counterattack. Even in the first half, they were able to keep it even, but they weren't able to create their chances. And it wasn't really until like the last 10 minutes that Lyon even looked at all dangerous. And I think that a huge difference here was the bench.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The bench was massive. But as I've alluded to before, I want to talk about Caroline Graham Hansen because she was something else against this Lyon squad. This Lyon squad didn't know what to do with her. And that first half, she was absolutely knackering them out by putting in opportunity after opportunity. And they just did not know what to do. And eventually, it sort of wore them down to allow for Bonmati's goal in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, Lyon in those last 10 minutes were finally threatening. They were finally getting opportunities. Barcelona suddenly looked unlike the Barcelona we had seen for the entirety of the 80 minutes before that. And the moment changes were made, the moment Putellas came on, boom, goal scored by Putellas, game changed, game over. I love that you called out Graham Hansen. The commentators that I was watching with also were calling her out, and I couldn't agree more. And she somehow, even as one of the best players in the world, still floats under the radar. I don't understand how, but for her to open up that entire side of the field, most of the attack for Barcelona was going down that side, and there's a reason for that.
I think the problem is, and it's something that Ellen White touched on, and the more I think about what she said, the more I think about it, is a lot of players go under the radar if they don't do well internationally, and it's not their fault. They happen to be from a nation that isn't doing well. And so Graham Hansen is Norwegian, I believe, and Norway, as we have covered many times, have not had the greatest
we certainly talked about them, but for all of the wrong reasons.
Exactly. Internationally, Ellen White specifically picked out Kim Little. Kim Little is probably one of the greatest midfielders to ever have played the women's game, but because she plays for Scotland, who have not had that international success, she tends to get overlooked. And I feel that
Barbara Banda, to bring it into the present.
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think that's true, that if you're not of a nation that's doing well internationally, you tend to be this undiscovered talent, unknown talent. And that's what I think is Hansen's problem. Unfortunately, she is Norwegian, not Spanish, for example, but she was pivotal and key to this squad. And I hope that Barcelona keep her.
I don't usually do this, but I have to throw massive credit to Lucy Bronze. I thought she had just an incredible game.
You never do that.
I never do it. I mean, I think she's a great player, but sometimes I think credit is given when it's not deserved. But this time it is so very well deserved to Lucy Bronze, because Lyon were doing what Chelsea did to Barcelona, which is they were going in physically. And you have to. We've talked about this too, Allie. With a team like Barcelona, if you sit back and you let them play and you try to outpace them, out-tactic them, they're going to play around you. You have to put a body on them and throw off their rhythm. And some of these Spanish players aren't physical and they can't put up with the physicality. And Lucy Bronze obviously added a lot of tactical elements and like defensive elements. But I think a big part of what she contributed defensively was she put her body on the line when it needed to be put on the line. And quite frankly, I think she saved 1 or 2 goals that could have gone in for Lyon on that back post.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And also shout out to Lucy Bronze, because she's the first British player to have 5 Champions League titles under her belt.
If there's one thing about Lucy Bronze, she loves to win. And she said it herself. She likes to win. That's it. The final thing I'll say here is that I think that Lyon did a really great job. It was very similar to the tactics that Chelsea tried to implement. But what they were missing was that counterattack. And they didn't have Dumornay, who rightfully so won Young Player of the Season for Champions League, and Bonmati won MVP, or whatever you guys call it over there. Dumornay was really shut down by Lucy Bronze. I think Diani and Cascarino, none of them were playing that true like hold up center forward that could press on the counter and hold up when needed. And that's what Lyon were missing. I thought their midfield actually held up really well against the big 3, Bonmati, Walsh, and Guiaro from Barcelona. I mean, those are that's a midfield of the ages, and I thought that Lyon's midfield held up well, considering how much chasing, considering how much running they were all doing. But at the end of the day, Lyon did have a couple chances in those final 10 minutes. They had an opportunity before Putellas really sealed the deal, and they couldn't do it.
Funny enough, Danielle van der Donk disagrees with you, because when asked what she thought went wrong for Lyon, she said that midfield-wise, we were weak. We had me playing as a number 10. We had Haran playing as a number 6, but we didn't really have that connective piece.
I can very much see that. I still think the midfield held up well, but that very much explains what I was saying, that they weren't able to have that hold up play and that counter attack. She's saying that there was no connective piece between the midfield line and the forward line, and she's putting that on the midfield. I guess I put that on the forwards, but she certainly knows better than us. All right, so to close this out, I'm going to bring up a question that we addressed a few weeks ago. I asked you, does Barcelona need to beat Lyon in a Champions League final to be considered a dynasty? They have now finally beaten Lyon in a Champions League final. They have taken down the Giants to secure that trophy. Do you consider Barcelona a dynasty of this era?
It's hard. It's a really hard one. I'm gonna be honest. I personally don't. I think that they're on the way to being one. I think they have definitely put the foundations in, and the group of players they've got is absolutely phenomenal, and they are on their way to being a dynasty. But I don't think they're quite there yet, because, like I said, this is their first quadruple that we have seen. Lyon have 5 quadruples. in
Yeah,
their respective league. You
7
know,
Champions Leagues? Is that
8
it?
Champions League.
8
This was going to be
Champions League?
this could have been their ninth. I think Barcelona are definitely on there, and I don't want to take anything away from this Barcelona team because I do think they are one of a kind at the moment. This team and what they're building. But the key word there is building. They are still constructing. They are still in the foundational stages. Do I think they're going to become one? Absolutely. But right now, they're not there yet. I think it's a bit premature to call them a dynasty.
I actually disagree. I think I would call them a dynasty of this age. They won in 2021, 2023, and 2024. And anytime you can win 3 out of 4 years or 3 out of 5, however many years you want to include, you're a dynasty of that age. And to be that dominant over the course of 4 years, that says something right there. And so I would call them a dynasty, whether they don't win another Champions League title for 10 years. I think we'll look back on this era and say, hey, the early 2020s belonged to Barcelona. Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world. To Mexico. The first leg of the final took place on Saturday, and America took on Monterrey. It was the home team who took the win 1-0. The second leg takes place on Tuesday, and we will have our champions.
To Scotland, and the Scottish Cup final took place this weekend, and it was Rangers taking on Hearts. A close game, which was hard fought by both teams. However, it was Rangers who emerged victorious, winning 2-0. 2 trophies out of 3 for the Glaswegian team. Not a bad season at all.
To the NWSL, Orlando Pride beat Portland 2-1 last Friday for their 8th win in a row, which makes them the holders of the longest win streak ever in the NWSL. The NWSL is on international break and will resume on Friday, June 7th. That's next Friday.
Have you checked out Total Football Analysis yet? TotalFootballAnalysis.com provides researched analysis on loads of football, including the women's game. Want all the stats in one place instead of drowning in a mountain of tabs? Want to explore key matchups and the tactics from both teams? Total Football Analysis provides the stats and analysis to help you learn more about the beautiful game. We have a special discount for listeners of the Women's Soccer Show. At checkout, type WOSO10 to get a full year for just €10. That's €40 of the yearly subscription. Head over to TotalFootballAnalysis.com and type WOSO10 at checkout.
Over to international break, everybody. International break is here, and it is the final window before Olympic rosters are set to be announced, which is huge for many, many reasons, all of which we are going to discuss. So we're going to talk the England roster drop, some of our thoughts on that, the U.S. women's national team roster drop, our thoughts on that. But before we do, let's just highlight a few fixtures that are coming up in this window for people to keep their eyes on.
Absolutely. So for you Lionesses fans, it is Euros qualifiers. England are currently second in the group of death and will be taking on group leaders France twice. So they'll be taking them on the 31st of May in England, up in Newcastle, St James's Park. And then on Tuesday, the 4th of June, they will be over in France on the 4th of June.
And for those of you who want to watch the U.S. games, the U.S. women are playing South Korea twice. Once this Saturday, June 1st, and for a second time, Tuesday, June 4th. And these are friendlies, but a reminder, these are the final friendlies before the Olympic roster is announced.
There are other fixtures to watch other than these 2 great nations. More Euros qualifying, specifically Norway versus Italy. And in the other game for the other group that England are in, Ireland will be taking on Sweden.
Those are some good matchups and some friendlies specifically for teams that are headed to the Olympics. Canada is going to play Mexico 2 times. Canada will be in the Olympics, not Mexico. Brazil, who will be in the Olympics, will be taking on Jamaica in this international break. And finally, both Japan and New Zealand, who will both be in the Olympics, are facing each other in friendlies. Those will all be fantastic matchups to watch. And now let's move it along. We're going to do the Lioness roster first because I feel like for a while we've done the U.S. rosters first. So let's talk notable makes, notable misses. Allie, what were some standouts upon initially seeing this roster drop?
I mean, to be fair, and any Lioness fan will know, it is a pretty standard Lioness squad. It feels like Serena has got her core squad that she only really changes out for injuries, but it was really exciting to see a couple of like returning. So like Millie Bright is back, who is always a stalwart in defence. Leah Williamson, our captain, is back.
Those are
which is
huge. Cannot be
huge.
understated.
Yeah, huge misses, huge that they've come back. It's great to see some young talent in there. So Grace Clinton gets another call up. We've talked how massive her season has been on loan at Spurs and potentially going back to Man United. So that is absolutely huge. Aggie Beaver-Jones getting her first call up. Again, had an outstanding season at Chelsea. So to see her get the first call up, which is huge. So it is a very standard Lioness roster. We've had a couple of dropouts. So Ruben Moy is out with a foot injury. And then it just recently got announced that Niamh Charles has done something to her thigh. So they're now calling Maya Letitia in from the standby list to go into a defender spot. Don't think we'll see her play, but I could be very wrong on that one. So yeah, so it is. I feel like it is. Serena has got her core group that she likes and trusts and knows how to play, and then through retirements / injuries, she's called in a couple of youngsters to help fill in the gap. The standby list I thought was very interesting. I thought the standby list was amazing.
Save. I was going to say, I think the standby list is kind of like the highlight of this roster drop. Specifically, you mentioned Jess Nas so many times on this podcast, and to see her get to go into her first camp, so well deserved. And I'm happy for her. I think there's a great way to enter the camp is she doesn't have to worry about fighting for playing time. She can just go in and train and work on kind of getting into the fold with the squad.
Yep, and another player that flew under the radar really but did so well for Liverpool, Missy Kearns, again is on the standby list. You know, Liverpool finished 4th this season. She's had a phenomenal season this season. So again, it's good because these players have played in the unders, and to see them get their first senior call into camp is massive.
I will say, when I look at the forward list, Aggie Beaver-Jones, Lauren Hemp, Lauren James, Chloe Kelly, Beth Mead, Alessia Russo, with, of course, Jess Nas as the alternate. I don't see a lot of center forwards. I don't see a lot of... I guess I'm just saying there's still a big hole to be filled in Ellen White's retirement, and it still has yet to be filled, and especially with Rachel Daly's retirement, I think that's the biggest gap I see here in this roster.
We don't really have any, I'm thinking of the WSL, to be honest, because that is what I watch the most of. We don't really have any English number 9s like Ellen. We haven't had one for a while, and Ellen was the last great one. And then obviously, as retired, we have a lot of wingers that can come in. We have a lot of number 10s that can go forward.
Yep.
But we don't really have that out and out number 9 that is English.
Does it beg the question of Beth England?
Beth England should be the answer. I don't understand why she's not the answer, if I'm honest. Again, I think it all comes down to Serena has her core group. If I'm honest, I'm looking at that list. Arsenal fans don't hate me, but I would potentially not have called Russo. Russo had an okay season this season at Arsenal. It was all right. It was her settling in. It wasn't fantastic. Whereas Beth England, you could argue, had a fantastic season at Tottenham. You know,
I think it's definitely deserving of a call up, but it's surprising to me that there's just no competition for that role right now. It doesn't seem, unless one of those wingers is going to be competing for that role as well. Maybe Lauren James is going to be playing more of a different, a holding 9 or something like that. But it just that's a big gap. And I agree with you. I don't understand why Beth England hasn't gotten a look. I really don't.
I think her stats say a lot, that she should have got a call. And you know what? Okay, yes, she's got some 8 years on her, but if we're talking about for Euro qualifiers, Nikita Paris scored so many goals for Man United this season. She was their top scorer, and she was one of the top scorers in the league. In fact, she was one of the top English scorers in the league. If we're trying to qualify for Euros, why are we not calling up Nikita Paris? I get you're trying to build for a future, but there is no point in building for a future if we can't go defend our title.
It'll be interesting to see for both games if there's a different lineup for both games versus France, or if it remains the same. And if it does, who's getting those starts? Who's getting those minutes? Because these are important games. I know last time you said I was dramatic by saying these next ones are must wins, but listen, it's kind of getting down to it for the qualifiers. You're probably going to make it no matter what, but why put yourself through the ringer? Go get those wins now. So I think that these are more important. There's a little more pressure on these than just a la-di-da. All right, let's move it along. Let's talk U.S. women's national team. And there's a lot to say about this. We actually did a full Patreon, a 45-minute Patreon. Tim came on and joined us. So if you want the full breakdown, because there's a lot to discuss in this roster, head over to our Patreon, patreon.com/thewoso show, and get that full 45-minute breakdown of this entire roster. Because like I said, we're not going to fit it all in right now. It's a whole episode in and of itself. But let's touch on the big points, Allie.
Yeah, so because I'm a snarky sort of person, I did find it funny that Corbin Albert has had her number changed. That made me laugh because she is now number 5 instead of number 15.
It is suspicious that her number was changed, and that Hall Hirschfeld, who we will come on to, in her first call up, got the number 15, which is maybe a good place to start because, listen, there's a lot to discuss here. But I guess we're going to start with the midfield. And Hall Hirschfeld got her first call up into U.S. national or senior national team camp. She has had a great NWSL season. I think it was a little surprising, but certainly deserved. But similar to how I would say there's point out the hole in the England roster, the big hole here, when you look at these lines, you look at the keepers, the defenders, the midfielders, the forwards, the biggest hole is in the midfield still, and trying to figure out who are the three, what works, because Lindsay Horan and Rose Lavelle are technically your best number 8 and number 10, but they just historically don't work well together. So how do you make that work? What do you do? It seems like Sam Coffey is the deserving number 6 that is going to start, and as she should be, she has been the best defensive center midfielder in the NWSL, in my opinion. I thought she should have gotten way more looks with Vlatko. She did not. This is so well deserved for her. But I look at the forwards, and it is so stacked. We can talk about this. It is so stacked to the point that I cannot believe some of those names won't be on the Olympic roster. That I have to think that there will probably be some moments where we will see a name that is listed as a forward pulled back into that midfield number 10 role and see how they do there, like a Jaden Shaw, like a Katarina Macario.
Guaranteed. It's like you see now that on the defenders, Emily Sonnet has been listed as a defender rather than midfield, as we've seen her be more comfortably playing at the moment. And I think it's because of that, because your Olympic roster is so small compared to your general roster. You have to have these players that can be pulled into different positions. It's like, I'm sure you and Tim talked about it a lot, but having Dunn listed as a forward
I'm so glad you brought it up.
It's huge. It's huge because it's what fans have been crying out for so long, to have her, instead of having her listed as a defender, is to have her as a forward. But let's be honest, she's going to get an Olympic call-up, and if she gets an Olympic call-up, she's going to be able to be used in both places. That's what Hayes
I don't
is going
think
to
it's guaranteed that she gets an Olympic call-up. Listen to who she's competing against. Crystal Dunn, Katarina Macario, Alex Morgan, Trinity Rodman, Jaden Shaw, Sophia Smith, Mallory Swanson. And I truly, when I say I can't believe some of those names might not make the roster, I genuinely think maybe some of them will, just in the midfield role. I don't know, but we always talk about versatility. Like you said, yes, Crystal Dunn could absolutely be called back into the midfield. That's something that's big for her. And speaking of versatility, you mentioned Emily Sonnet in the defenders. We have to talk about some of these defender call-ups. I personally like that Sonnet got called into the defenders. A, that's where she's been playing this whole season with Gotham FC. And B, Emily Sonnet was a good answer for the Vlatko era when he wanted to play with 2 holding center midfielders. Emma Hayes clearly does not want that, and thus Emily Sonnet is not the answer. So,
Emily Sonnet is always the answer. I'm sorry, but Emily Sonnet is always the answer.
The defenders will be so interesting because you look at Tierna Davidson. She can play center back and outside back, and also that holding center midfield. Emily Sonnet can also play all of those positions. There's a lot of versatility here. You've got Casey Kruger. She can play inside and outside. And then you've got the one I want to talk about. Sam Staub gets her first call up to the U.S. women's national team. And it is so well deserved. For those of you who do not watch the NWSL, this is one of the most consistent, if not the most consistent player in this league. She set the NWSL's consecutive regular season start record. She made her 100th consecutive regular start. She is a lockdown defender. And one of the things I mentioned on the Patreon with Tim when we talked about this was, look, right now when you look at these defenders, it seems like Tierna Davidson and Naomi Girma will be the center back pairing, and they've been paired really well together. I love how they've been working. But Davidson gets hurt a lot. Also, their skill sets are very similar. Imagine perhaps having like a Naomi Girma paired with somebody like Sam Staub, who not only can read the game really well, but is kind of like a punisher. Like she'll get physical. And to have that balance plus the speed that Staub has, I really hope we see her in some of these games. I think she could be a late add to this roster and fully make the roster. But I also admit that I am fully blinded by the fact that I really enjoy how she plays.
I was going to say, I feel like there's a little bias there. I was going to say, my last thing, and it's more a personal thing, I'm sad that it seems to be end of an era that Salburn didn't get another call up. I feel like we may have had her call time on her international career, which makes me very sad because we all know how much I love Becky and how much I think she is, that leader and has been that leader, and she's still doing it for the Thorns. But I do think this may be,
she will very much be missed. And I guess to turn it into a positive, I do feel like Naomi Girma brings so much of that same energy that Becky brought, and that's really beautiful to see. All right, this is Emma Hayes' first real camp with the U.S. Women's National Team. These will be her first 2 games on the sideline. It'll be so interesting to see. And what's even more interesting is that she gets this singular camp with them, and then the roster gets announced, the 18-person roster, which of course we're going to be covering. Oh, I can't wait for those to be expanded at some point in the future, hopefully. All right, and that is it for us here at the Women's Soccer Show. A reminder, head over to our Patreon. Check out all the extra content there. You can follow us on social media. And we will be back, per usual, next Wednesday. So for the Women's Soccer Show, I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.